The Galactic Alliance had been the undisputed power in the galaxy for centuries. Their fleets, armed with technology far beyond anything the human race could imagine, kept peace across the stars. Peace that came at a heavy cost. The Alliance's reach stretched across countless worlds, each one under the careful watch of their highly trained, unyielding military. They controlled the galaxy with a firm grip, and no one dared challenge their authority. But when an old, rusted warship appeared at the edge of Alliance space, it was met with laughter. The Vanguard was an outdated relic from a primitive era. The ship was a hodgepodge of makeshift repairs, its hull scarred from years of neglect, its weapons barely functional. Its human crew, led by Captain Elara Hayes, had no advanced training in the ways of galactic warfare. The Vanguard was the last thing anyone expected to pose a threat. News of the ship's appearance reached the ears of the Alliance's high command, but they dismissed it as nothing more than an insignificant nuisance. It was just a matter of time before the fleet neutralized this minor disturbance. With the Vanguard now entering Alliance-controlled space, the command gave the order: eliminate the ship and its crew. They couldn't allow such a foolish human warship to tarnish the Alliance's reputation. However, as the fleet set out on their mission to destroy the Vanguard, something unexpected happened. Captain Hayes, aware of the Alliance's overwhelming superiority, knew she had no chance of facing them head-on. Instead, she relied on her instincts and the one thing humans did best: adaptability. The Vanguard had been a forgotten relic, but it was also unpredictable, something the Alliance could not account for. As the massive Alliance fleet moved to encircle her, Hayes made a split-second decision. Instead of running or fighting directly, she would use the nearby asteroid field to her advantage. The ship's sensors, while outdated, were just good enough to navigate through the dense asteroid belt. The Alliance ships, sleek and advanced, struggled to keep up in the craggy maze of rocks and debris. The battle that ensued was anything but conventional. The humans had no fleet support, no advanced weapons, just their wits and their will to survive. With incredible precision, the Vanguard maneuvered through the field, dodging blasts from Alliance ships, while picking off one vessel after another. Each shot fired from the Vanguard was calculated and exact, striking with the kind of surprise the Alliance had never seen before. As the battle raged on, the Alliance fleet found itself in chaos. The larger, faster ships struggled to track the erratic movements of the Vanguard. Even more surprising was the way Captain Hayes commanded her crew. There was no fear in her voice. She spoke with the confidence of someone who knew their ship inside and out. Every member of the crew, though small in number, followed her lead with unshakable resolve. In the end, despite the odds, the Vanguard left several Alliance ships crippled, and some even destroyed. The human crew, though battered and bruised, managed to escape the ambush with their lives intact. But what really stunned the Alliance was the realization that a human warship, small, old, and seemingly no match for their superior firepower, had just made a fool of their fleet. The Vanguard was far from the laughingstock the Alliance had assumed it to be. In that first battle, Captain Hayes proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their technology or weapons, but in their determination and ability to think outside the box. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of something far greater. The galaxy had just witnessed the beginning of a war unlike any it had ever seen. The Alliance was in disbelief. After their first encounter with the Vanguard, they had expected a swift victory. Instead, they were left to lick their wounds, scrambling to comprehend how a ship so outdated, so utterly outclassed, had managed to destroy or disable multiple advanced warships. The human vessel, seemingly little more than a floating relic, had just outsmarted their most elite fleet. Captain Hayes didn't have time to bask in the victory, though. She knew this was only the beginning. The Alliance would not take this lightly. She had played her hand well, but now the enemy would be coming with full force. On the Alliance side, there was growing concern. The Vanguard was not some isolated fluke. The more the Alliance studied the battle's aftermath, the more they realized something deeply unsettling about the humans. They were unpredictable. The Alliance had prepared for nearly every possible conflict, but humans didn't fight the way others did. They didn't rely on raw power or endless resources. Instead, they fought with something deeper: creativity, innovation, and above all, tenacity. It was something the Alliance had not encountered before. Despite their shock, the High Command quickly dispatched reinforcements. This time, they wouldn't underestimate the human ship. The fleet's new orders were clear: destroy the Vanguard at all costs. But Captain Hayes was ready. She knew the Alliance would send a much larger force, and she knew that even with her crew's ingenuity, they couldn't keep running forever. Instead of retreating, she made a bold decision. The Vanguard would strike first. The humans weren't going to wait for the enemy to make the next move. Hayes had studied the Alliance's tactics, and she knew that their fleet relied heavily on predictability and precision. Their ships, though advanced, were designed for exact, coordinated strikes, something the human ship could exploit. With little more than a skeleton crew, the Vanguard set course for an Alliance supply depot on a remote moon. The depot, located near the borders of Alliance space, was poorly guarded, an oversight the Alliance had made, assuming no one would dare attack there. But that assumption was about to be proven wrong. Captain Hayes ordered her crew to use the moon's dense atmosphere to mask their approach. They carefully altered the ship's trajectory to avoid detection, slipping into the supply depot's range without triggering any alarms. The crew worked with flawless coordination, a tight-knit unit that had grown into something far greater than the sum of its parts. Their target was a collection of vital resources: ammunition, fuel, and technology that the Alliance had been stockpiling for future campaigns. As they neared the depot, Hayes made the call. With a single command, the crew activated the explosive charges they had set up on the depot's storage facilities. The results were immediate. Massive explosions rocked the surface of the moon as the depot was engulfed in flames. The Alliance had been caught completely off guard. The Vanguard didn't wait around to see the aftermath. They made a swift exit, leaving the Alliance scrambling to respond. The destruction wasn't just physical. It was a blow to the Alliance's morale. The attack was a clear message. Humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting back. As the Vanguard made its escape, Captain Hayes surveyed the wreckage from the cockpit. There was no time to celebrate. This was only the beginning. The Alliance would retaliate, but now they would be dealing with a different kind of war. A war fought by people who knew how to turn the tables, who knew how to use their wits to win battles against impossible odds. The humans had made their mark on the galaxy, and the Alliance would soon realize that no one, not even them, could predict the full extent of the human spirit. The news of the Vanguard's audacious strike against the Alliance supply depot spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Captain Hayes and her crew had done what many thought impossible. They had struck at the heart of the Alliance's supply chain, leaving them scrambling to recover. The attack wasn't just a tactical victory. It was a message to every oppressed planet and every rebellion scattered across the stars. Humanity was no longer the underdog. They were fighters. But the Alliance was far from beaten. Their pride had been bruised, and their commanders were furious. In response to the Vanguard's growing reputation, the High Command called upon their most formidable assets. They would not allow this foolish human warship to challenge the established order. The Alliance would crush the resistance, once and for all. The next phase of the conflict was inevitable. The Alliance amassed a massive fleet, more than enough to wipe out the Vanguard and end the human rebellion in one fell swoop. The message was clear. This was no longer a skirmish, it was war. And this time, they wouldn't underestimate their opponent. Captain Hayes, however, refused to let fear dictate her actions. She gathered her crew for a briefing, looking each of them in the eye with the same unwavering confidence she had shown since the beginning. There was no time to mourn their small victories. The fight was far from over. The Alliance was coming, and they were bringing everything they had. "We've learned a lot," Hayes began, her voice calm but resolute. "The Alliance thinks they can simply overwhelm us. But they're wrong. They don't understand us. They don't understand what we're capable of when we have nothing left to lose. Her words stirred the crew. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something far greater: freedom. The Alliance, with all its power and might, couldn't comprehend the fire burning within every human heart. The Vanguard wasn't just a ship. It was the last stand of a people who refused to be crushed. The next few days were spent preparing for what seemed like the inevitable. The Vanguard was battered from previous skirmishes, its weapons strained, and a crew worn thin from their constant battles. Yet they rallied. Every member of the crew, no matter their role, worked tirelessly to repair and prepare the ship. They could feel the weight of the coming battle pressing down on them, but they had no intention of giving up. The crew wasn't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for their people, their planet, and for every world that had been oppressed by the Alliance. Then, the day arrived. The Alliance fleet, vast and unyielding, entered the system. Their flagship, the Echelon, was the size of a small moon, its weapons capable of reducing entire cities to ash in seconds. It was the most powerful ship in the galaxy, and it led a massive fleet of advanced warships, all eager to wipe out the pesky humans once and for all. But as the Alliance ships advanced, the Vanguard remained hidden in the shadows of a nearby asteroid field. Captain Hayes knew that the element of surprise was their only advantage. Their ship might be outdated, but it was agile and resourceful. The Alliance fleet, with its highly advanced technology and superior numbers, would never expect what was coming next. "We don't need to beat them," Hayes said, her voice steady and determined. "We just need to outsmart them." With that, the Vanguard sprang to life. Using the asteroid field to mask its movement, the human warship darted between rocks and debris, evading the Alliance's sensors and weapons. It was a game of cat and mouse, but the crew of the Vanguard was playing for keeps. Each move was calculated, each step a carefully planned response to the Alliance's superior firepower. As the Alliance fleet moved forward, they could not predict the chaos that was about to unfold. The Vanguard wasn't just running from them. It was luring them into a trap. The Alliance fleet was relentless. After the devastating attack on the supply depot and the successful ambush in the asteroid field, they could no longer afford to treat the human warship as a mere nuisance. Their pride had been hurt, and their reputation among the other galactic powers was at stake. It was time to crush this rebellion before it could spread any further. The High Command of the Alliance issued a new order: track down the Vanguard at all costs. They would send their most elite forces to ensure that no more human ships could ever pose a threat to their dominance. They would take no chances this time. For Captain Hayes and the crew of the Vanguard, the stakes had never been higher. They had proven their ability to survive and outsmart the enemy in the past, but now the Alliance was coming with everything they had. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making a stand for humanity's future. If they failed now, everything they had fought for would be lost. As the human warship traveled through deep space, Captain Hayes kept a constant watch on the Alliance's movements. They had already demonstrated their ability to strike without warning, and she knew that staying on the move was their best chance of survival. The Vanguard couldn't afford to engage the Alliance head-on, not against such a formidable force. Hayes had to think strategically. Every decision had to be precise. In the meantime, the Alliance fleet was closing in. Their ships, sleek and fast, moved in coordinated formations, ready to corner the Vanguard and strike with overwhelming force. They had learned from their previous encounters with the humans and were determined not to be caught off guard again. Hayes was aware of the gravity of the situation, but she wasn't about to let fear dictate her next move. Instead of continuing to flee, she decided on a more daring plan. The Vanguard would take the fight to them. There was an old battle strategy humans had used for centuries, and Captain Hayes believed it could work now. It was time for an ambush. With a small but capable crew, the Vanguard set course for a nearby nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust that would conceal their movements from the Alliance's sensors. The nebula was a perfect hiding place, but it also came with its own dangers. The dense particles could interfere with the ship's systems, making navigation difficult and putting the Vanguard at risk if they weren't careful. But Hayes had no other choice. This was their best shot at taking the fight to the Alliance before they could corner them completely. As the Vanguard entered the nebula, the crew worked quickly to adjust the ship's systems to avoid any major malfunctions. The next few hours were tense as they hid in the swirling dust, watching as the Alliance fleet moved past them, unaware of the trap they were walking into. Hayes held her breath, her fingers gripping the armrests of her command chair as she waited for the right moment to strike. Then it came. A single Alliance destroyer, straggling behind the main fleet, passed too close to the edge of the nebula. Without warning, Captain Hayes ordered the crew to engage. The Vanguard powered up its outdated weapons systems, firing with deadly precision. The Alliance ship was caught completely off guard, its shields flickering out as the first volley hit. Within moments, the destroyer was disabled, drifting helplessly in the nebula's fog. The Alliance fleet immediately responded, turning their attention to the source of the attack. But by the time they realized what had happened, the Vanguard had already vanished into the thick of the nebula once again. The surprise attack had worked. The crew of the Vanguard had struck a blow against the Alliance, showing them that even when outnumbered and outgunned, the human spirit could still fight back. The Alliance was shaken. They had underestimated the human warship, and now they realized that the Vanguard was far more than just a foolhardy ship. It was a symbol of defiance, and the humans were not about to let their oppressors win. The human resistance had made their presence known, and the galaxy was in turmoil. The Alliance, once a symbol of order and dominance, was shaken. The Vanguard had proven that humans, with their creativity and resilience, were a force to be reckoned with. But the Alliance was not one to back down easily. Their pride had been wounded, and now they were ready to unleash their most devastating weapon, the Imperius. The Imperius was a legend in the Alliance. It was an Imperius-class dreadnought, the most advanced and powerful warship ever created. Its weapons were capable of obliterating entire fleets with a single strike, and its hull was nearly impenetrable. It was said to be the pinnacle of Alliance military technology, and its reputation had struck fear into the hearts of many. The Imperius was unstoppable. At least, that's what the Alliance believed. Captain Hayes knew that facing the Imperius head-on would be certain defeat. The human ship was no match for such overwhelming firepower, but she wasn't about to give up. Hayes had always been unpredictable, and she knew the only way to survive was to turn the tables once again. There was no room for hesitation. It was time for a new strategy. As the Imperius and its fleet advanced toward the heart of the human resistance, Captain Hayes ordered the Vanguard to make a bold move. They would infiltrate the heart of the Alliance's military operations and disable their command center. If they could take out the Imperius' ability to communicate with the rest of the fleet, they might just have a chance at survival. The mission was perilous, and the stakes could not have been higher. The Alliance knew that if they lost control of the Imperius, they would lose everything. Captain Hayes was fully aware of the danger, but she also knew that the future of humanity depended on this one shot. There was no turning back. With only a small window of opportunity, the Vanguard made its way toward an Alliance base located on a remote moon. The facility housed crucial communication and coordination systems for the Imperius and its fleet. The plan was simple: get in, disable their communication array, and get out before the enemy even knew what had happened. As the crew of the Vanguard prepared for the mission, the tension in the air was palpable. Every member knew the risks, but they were also determined. They were no longer just soldiers on a ship. They were a symbol of defiance, a testament to humanity's refusal to bow to tyranny. Under the cover of darkness, the Vanguard slipped into the moon's orbit, its sensors tuned to avoid detection. The Alliance base was heavily guarded, but Captain Hayes trusted her crew. They were resourceful, skilled, and more than capable of executing the mission. Once they reached the base, Captain Hayes led a small team down to the surface. With quiet precision, they infiltrated the facility, avoiding patrols and bypassing security systems with ease. Time was of the essence, and they moved quickly, reaching the communications array in record time. Hayes gave the order to disable the array. But just as they were about to complete the task, alarms began to blare. They had been discovered. The team worked faster, desperately trying to finish the job before the Alliance could send reinforcements. There was no turning back now. Just as the last signal was cut off, the Alliance forces arrived in full force. The team raced back to the Vanguard, knowing they had only moments before the entire base would be swarming with enemy soldiers. With the comm array disabled, the Imperius was left blind, unable to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. The Vanguard made a hasty retreat, narrowly escaping the base's defenses. As they jumped to hyperspace, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. The Imperius was now isolated and vulnerable. The Alliance's most powerful weapon had been neutralized, but the war was far from over. The Alliance would retaliate, of course, but Captain Hayes and her crew had shown them something the galaxy would never forget. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater. Freedom. The Alliance had taken a hard hit. The Vanguard's unexpected victories were starting to send shockwaves through the enemy's ranks. Captain Hayes knew it was only a matter of time before the Alliance regrouped and came back stronger. She had been given a brief reprieve, but the war was far from over. The next move would determine the future of the conflict. For weeks, Captain Hayes and her crew had been on the move, harried by the Alliance's relentless pursuit. They had struck a blow to the heart of the enemy's operations, but the cost of evading them was taking its toll. The Vanguard was an old ship, constantly requiring repairs, and its crew, though fiercely loyal, was weary. Even the brightest of human spirits couldn't defy the physical limitations of time. Hayes stood at the front of the bridge, looking out at the vast emptiness of space. The stars stretched before her, seemingly infinite, and yet in this vast void, she and her crew were hunted like prey. "We need to make a decisive move," Hayes said, her voice sharp with determination. The crew, once again gathered in the briefing room, listened closely. They were familiar with their captain's way of thinking. When they were pushed to the edge, she found a way to fight back. Her idea was simple, yet extremely dangerous. The Alliance was growing bolder, sending their elite fleets into uncharted territories in search of the Vanguard. Hayes knew that if they could find a way to exploit the Alliance's overconfidence, they could deal a blow that would set them back, buying the Resistance precious time. "The Imperius," she said, her eyes narrowing as she spoke. The Imperius was the most powerful ship the Alliance had ever built. If they could destroy it, or at least disable it, they might have a chance to cripple the Alliance's war effort. But the Imperius was not just any ship. It was a fortress, surrounded by the strongest fleet in the galaxy. The mission would be a one-way trip for the Vanguard unless they managed to strike fast and retreat before the Alliance could regroup. The stakes were higher than ever, but Hayes was convinced that if they didn't take the fight to the heart of the Alliance, they would lose. The humans had always fought with everything they had, and this was their chance to prove it once and for all. "Captain," one of the officers, Lieutenant Asher, spoke up. "The Imperius is almost untouchable. Even with our best weapons, we don't stand a chance against it." Hayes turned to face him. "That's why we'll use their arrogance against them. We won't fight them head-on. We'll take advantage of their weakness. We'll infiltrate their fleet, strike at the heart of their command, and create chaos." Her plan was to slip past the fleet undetected, using their own overconfidence to get close to the Imperius. The ship would strike at the most vulnerable point, the Imperius's engines. If they could disable its propulsion systems, the flagship would be stranded. And if they could do it without being detected, the Alliance would never know what hit them. The risk was immense. If the crew failed, there would be no escape. But the Vanguard's crew wasn't afraid of failure. They had already proven that the impossible was possible, and they were ready to go to any lengths to ensure humanity's survival. The hours leading up to the mission were filled with tense preparations. The crew worked furiously to make the necessary adjustments to the ship's systems, pushing the aging vessel beyond its limits. But no matter how old the ship was, it was still a symbol of humanity's defiance, a testament to the resilience of a people who refused to bow. As the Vanguard slipped into the void of space, Captain Hayes felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. This mission could change everything. The Alliance thought they were invincible, but they hadn't faced the full force of humanity's spirit. Now, the time had come to show them. The silence of space felt deafening as the Vanguard approached the Alliance fleet. Captain Hayes stood at the helm, her fingers hovering over the controls as she guided the ship with precision through the shadows of distant asteroids and cosmic debris. Their mission was risky, possibly suicidal, but the stakes couldn't have been higher. If they failed, not only would they lose the Vanguard and her crew, but humanity's last hope for survival would be crushed. The Imperius loomed ahead, its massive form bathed in the cold light of distant stars. It was an imposing sight, nearly invincible, its shields capable of withstanding anything short of a direct hit from a star. It was surrounded by an armada of destroyers, cruisers, and warships, each one bristling with weapons. No one had ever come close to taking it down. Yet the Vanguard had something none of those ships had, the element of surprise. "We're on course, Captain," Lieutenant Asher reported, his voice calm but tinged with tension. Hayes nodded. "We're almost there. Keep us steady, and don't make a sound." The crew worked in absolute silence, their focus sharp as they navigated through the asteroid field. The ship was in full stealth mode, using every trick they knew to avoid detection. The Alliance fleet, brimming with confidence, had no idea what was coming. Then, the first signs of detection came. The Imperius began to send out pulses, sweeping the area with its advanced sensors, looking for anything that didn't belong. The ship had seen countless ambushes before, but the Vanguard was different. The humans weren't trying to engage, they were trying to disappear. "Stay quiet," Captain Hayes ordered, her voice a low whisper. "We're not here to fight. We're here to sabotage." As they got closer, Hayes could feel her heart racing. There was no room for error. They had calculated their course carefully, plotting the exact position where they could get close enough to strike at the Imperius's engine core. If they hit it right, it would be enough to disable the flagship and create chaos within the fleet. But one mistake, one wrong move, and the Alliance would be on them in an instant. The countdown had begun. They were close enough now that even a slight change in course could give them away. The crew had prepared for this moment their entire careers, knowing that if they failed, the galaxy would never know they had been there. But if they succeeded, it would shake the foundations of the Alliance itself. "Prepare the engine disruptors," Hayes ordered. "We don't have much time." The disruptors were a dangerous weapon, designed to temporarily disable the propulsion systems of large ships. If they were used correctly, the Imperius would be left floating helplessly in space, unable to join the fight. The trick was getting close enough to plant the devices without being detected. They were within striking distance now. The Vanguard crept closer, slipping through the gaps in the enemy fleet like a shadow. Captain Hayes held her breath. The slightest mistake now, and everything would fall apart. Then it happened. A low hum filled the bridge as the disruptors powered up. Hayes watched the readout, her finger poised to fire. The moment of truth had arrived. Just as she was about to give the command, a high-pitched beep echoed through the bridge. The Imperius had launched a secondary sensor sweep, and the Vanguard had just crossed its path. "Captain," Asher shouted, his voice tight with panic. "We've been detected." The enemy was closing in fast. The stealth was no longer an option. "We're committed now," Hayes said, her voice calm but firm. "Fire the disruptors. Now." In that moment, all the tension, all the pressure, came crashing down. The disruptors fired, and the energy surged through the sensors as they hit their target. The Imperius's engines shuddered, and for a moment, its mighty form seemed to falter in space. Then the alarms went off. The Imperius had been crippled. The mighty flagship was dead in the water, unable to move or engage in combat. But as the crew of the Vanguard celebrated the success of their mission, the reality of the situation hit them all at once. They had made their move, and now the Alliance would come at them with everything they had. The battle was far from over. The Imperius was immobilized, but the victory was bittersweet. Captain Hayes knew it wouldn't be long before the Alliance realized what had happened and retaliated with everything they had. They were now deep in enemy territory, surrounded by warships that were eager for revenge. The clock was ticking, and there was no guarantee they would survive the next few hours. But there was no turning back now. The humans had shown the Alliance that they were not to be underestimated. The spark of rebellion had been ignited, and the galaxy would never be the same. "Captain," Lieutenant Asher said, his voice tight with urgency, "the Imperius is disabled, but their fleet is closing in. They'll bring everything down on us if we stay here." "I know," Hayes replied, her voice calm but steely, "but we've done what we came to do. Now it's time to make them pay for every world they've crushed. Prepare for a final stand." The Vanguard was a relic, its systems old and its hull battered, but it was still a symbol of defiance. The crew had faced impossible odds before, and they had always found a way to fight back. Hayes wasn't about to let this be the end. This would be their final fight, and she was determined to make it count. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, their warships surrounding the Vanguard in a tightening ring. It wouldn't be long before the Vanguard was overwhelmed, but Captain Hayes had a plan, a desperate gamble that might just give them a fighting chance. "Divert all power to the engines," Hayes ordered, her eyes scanning the bridge. "We're going to make a run for it." The crew worked in unison, pushing the ship to its limits. The Vanguard's aging systems groaned under the strain, but it moved, a testament to the crew's willpower. They had one shot at this, and they were going to make it count. "We've got a clear path," Asher called out. "We can make it past their front lines." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Set course for the edge of the system. We're going to make a jump to hyperspace." It was a risky move. The Vanguard's hyperdrive was barely functional, and jumping while surrounded by enemy ships was almost certain death. But if they didn't try, they would all be captured or destroyed. The crew was ready to face whatever came next. The Vanguard surged forward, breaking through the enemy line. The Alliance ships fired, their energy blasts missing by mere meters as Hayes expertly maneuvered the ship. The Vanguard was faster than most of the Alliance ships, and its unpredictable movements made it harder to target. But they weren't out of danger yet. The enemy fleet was closing in fast, and the countdown to hyperspace was getting closer. "Hold on," Hayes shouted. "We're almost there." The Vanguard shuddered as another blast rocked its hull, and alarms blared in every corridor. The crew fought to maintain control, working as one unit to keep the ship intact. It was a race against time. The enemy fleet was on their tail, and if they couldn't make the jump in the next few seconds, they would be torn apart. "Engage the hyperdrive," Hayes barked. In that moment, the Vanguard leaped forward, its engines screaming as it entered hyperspace, narrowly avoiding the final barrage of fire from the Alliance ships. The universe stretched out before them, and the crew felt the jolt of the jump. They had made it. Silence filled the bridge as the crew collectively let out a breath they didn't realize they had been holding. They had escaped, verily. Hayes allowed herself a brief moment of relief before turning to face her crew. "We did it. The Imperius is down. The Alliance has been struck a blow they won't forget." But she knew the war was far from over. The Vanguard had bought humanity a precious moment, but the fight for freedom had only just begun. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, but the resistance had proven that it was capable of striking back. The humans had shown that they were unstoppable when they stood united. They had faced the most powerful force in the galaxy and survived. And they would do it again.